WARDOGS isn't even fully out yet, and I've already spent way too much time restarting this game trying to figure out which settings are actually worth using. I tested everything from potato mode all the way through low, medium, and high. I did this testing in the offline training mode, but going into online, I found similar results. So I'm going to show you the actual performance difference, what the game looks like at each level, and at the end, I'll show you what I actually run. For these tests, I'm using a 9800X3D, 64 gigs of DDR5, as well as a 5070 Ti, and we're playing on 1440p. Before messing around with all the presets though, I wanted to figure out what anti-aliasing or upscaling option actually made the most sense. So I started with around medium to high settings and compared the available options. Starting with DLAA, which is going to be like native render resolution, we're looking at 150 to 160 FPS average. Not too bad considering we're running like medium high settings. Moving into DLSS quality, we can see about a 15 to 20 FPS increase here depending on where we're looking. And I will say it did actually look a little bit better than DLAA as well with the sharpening and the aliasing, but results may vary. Moving into FSR3 quality, we can see the FPS gain is a little bit more than DLSS quality. However, I will say it did look a little worse than DLSS. So if you're on an NVIDIA card, you might just want to consider running that. Moving over to DLAA, which is the highest quality out of the bunch, I would say it looked a lot better than TAA. We can see the performance is definitely taking a hit here, dropping down to about 130 to 140 on average. Overall recommendation for anti-aliasing, I would say DLSS quality is a good middle ground between quality and performance. However, if you like the way TAA looks, you could run that as well. And if you want the game to look absolutely the best that it can, I'd rock DLAA. Moving into the graphic settings, we're starting with the potato preset, which is prefer max performance as well. I am also running TAA for all of these graphic tests just to show the difference in native resolution. We can also see that we're getting a pretty big performance uplift compared to the medium and high settings I was running before. We're looking at like 280, 270 FPS, which if you want the best frame times and the best input latency in WARDOGS, this is definitely the settings to run. However, might be harder to spot enemies. You know, you're also trading away that quality. You can see some of the pop in here is pretty bad. I'm not sure how that would equate to enemy pop in and such. So that's something to keep in mind. You can also mess with resolution scale in this game too. Let's say you have a really bad PC, you're just trying to get this game to run. You can see this is probably not the way to play the game. It's going to be kind of hard to see anything, but it's technically possible if you wanted to do it. And we can see the FPS, not much of a difference here. We're probably limited in some way or another for boosting the FPS, but it's really cool that they have all these options available. Now, if you wanted to meme on your friends, you could tell them to run resolution scaling at 1% and watch them laugh as they play Minecraft, basically. Hopping into the in-game settings, we're going to change everything from potato to low, basically. And you will notice that the shading is going to be like the one setting that forces you to restart the game. So you will need to restart the game if that's a setting that you're going to change. Everything else you can change within the game with no issues. Taking a look at the FPS on low, we can see quite a dramatic change in the FPS. We're getting 190 to 200 FPS on average doing our lap here. And the quality does look quite a bit better, I will say. It might be worth doing this if you want to be able to see enemies further away. You don't want the game to look horribly bad, and you don't mind some of the trade-off with the performance. One thing I was interested to see is how much FPS we can get back using DLSS quality. And we can see here, I think just because the textures are so different, and it really is not the max performance setting, we can see we're not really gaining back that much FPS with DLSS quality. But if you wanted to find a decent balance, it might be worth like chucking some settings on medium, some settings on low, and maybe using DLSS quality to find like a good performance for your system. I did also try and see if TAA looks any better for the scopes. I noticed the scopes have a bit of like shimmering and kind of light follow with them, but no, it doesn't seem to be anything based around the anti-aliasing. Going up to medium, this is where the game is starting to look really good. We drop from around 180 or 190 on low to about 150 or 160 on medium. But yeah, the textures look really good. The shadows look good. The reflections are looking clean. And this is definitely a higher quality version of the game. Wanted to take a look again at DLSS Quality, this time on medium, and we can see again about a 15 to 20 FPS gain here, but with the textures and shadows and everything higher quality, it looks really good with the upscaling, and especially if you're in 1440p, it's not going to be that bad. Now, it is personal preference, whether you want to run DLSS or not, that's going to be up to you. But if you're trying to find a good balance, this might be a decent way to go. Moving into high, we can see the FPS drop is a lot less than other settings. We're looking at about 145 to 150 compared to medium, where we were at 155, 160. This gives us a pretty good understanding of how well the game scales going into the higher graphic settings. The game also looks pretty similar to medium, where like when we went from potato to low, it was a pretty big difference, but now going up to medium to high, not as big of a graphical difference. For our ultra preset, I basically just cranked everything like bloom and lens flare just to see what the game would look like on the maximum settings. And we can see here we're getting about 115 to 120 FPS, but you have a lot of extra post-processing going on here. So that does make sense. And this is pretty much the highest quality the game is going to look other than rocking DLAA with these settings. Of course, I had to check out DLAA as well just to see how good it would look and what the performance would be like. Noticed about 105 to 110 FPS with these settings, and moving to quality brought us to a little bit higher than TAA, about 145, 150, pretty similar to our high settings. Moving to DLSS balanced on this ultra preset, we can see it's not really giving us much back in terms of FPS. Maybe a couple FPS here and there, and the quality isn't really that great. I would probably recommend running towards DLSS quality with just lower in-game settings. If you're enjoying the video so far, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below if you want to see some more WARDOGS testing. Taking a look at medium for a second, just to refresh our memory, we can see here that it is actually decent quality for DLSS, and it's nice that we get a bit of a performance bump for dropping down our native resolution and upscaling it. WARDOGS also has DLSS frame generation, and this creates extra in-between frames to make the motion look smoother and push the displayed FPS higher. As we can see, we're getting like 280, 300 FPS here. It can feel noticeably smoother visually, especially at an already high base FPS, but there can be extra latency or a slightly floaty feel compared to true native FPS. That's why a lot of competitive players will leave this off, especially for like FPS games where input latency is super important. Usually you're going to care about more about the lowest possible input latency and consistent real frames than a higher looking FPS counter. This is really going to depend on your base FPS as well. If you're going from like 200 to 260 FPS using frame gen, you're not going to feel it as much as someone going from 60 FPS to 260, right? Like that difference is going to be the difference in the input latency and how floaty the game is going to feel. One thing I was interested in checking as well was the shading setting. Here we can see we're on medium shading with like 137 FPS. And after the forced restart, which is required for changing the setting, coming back to the exact same spot, we can see about a 20 FPS gain here, and everything looks a lot brighter and maybe easier to spot enemies and shadows. So that's something to keep in mind if you want like a 20 FPS gain and like the way it looks. I think for WARDOGS, I would recommend medium to high settings while using DLSS quality, and that's going to give you a really good balance of quality of the game looking decent and not like potato mode, but also still enough performance that you're going to feel comfortable in gunfights. And if you're on a high refresh rate monitor, game still looks really good. DLSS cleans up some of the blur that I was seeing with TAA. And yeah, you're getting a good solid performance boost using it as well. Some other settings you might want to look into for performance or just how you prefer to play the game is going to be your field of view. All of my testing was done in 90 FOV, as well as picture-in-picture scope is going to affect performance. It's going to give you more peripheral vision around the scope. However, the setting is going to affect performance, so that's another thing to keep in mind. Now, if you want pure competitive, pure FPS, you can basically just go potato mode, maybe bring up a few things like texture quality and such so that you're able to see further away and that enemy details are going to be, somewhat visible, but you're going to be getting pretty high FPS for a high refresh rate monitor. If you want that low frame time and low input delay, definitely the way to go. Now, if you want the game to look beautiful I would probably go high or ultra with DLSS quality again. You're still going to get a decent amount of FPS here, but the game is also going to look really, really nice. You can have that bloom, you can have that lens flare if that's what you like. Maybe you're playing this on like a 65-inch TV on the couch, you want it to look sick, then that's probably the setup to go with. And if you're rocking a 5090 and you, again, want the best quality you can get, I would go ultra with DLAA. It's going to look amazing. You're giving up like 30 to 40 FPS compared to ultra with DLSS quality, but it's definitely your enthusiast screenshot option rather than something that I would probably recommend for normal gameplay. So yeah, that's basically where I landed with WARDOGS. For 1440p, I think medium with DLSS quality is going to be a good middle ground for a lot of people. If you played the playtest, drop your GPU, CPU, and resolution and what kind of performance you were getting. I'm curious how it ran on other people's systems. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace.